All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today for our next installment of our Friends of HSF Alumni Speaker Series. We're very excited today because we have Chris Land with us, who's going to be discussing all of the topics: cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, banking and tech, financial services, law school, and public service and government careers. So we're very excited to have him. Our student moderator for today is Juan Roca Paisley, and Juan is a sophomore from Miami, Florida, majoring in humanities with a minor in physics. And Juan's interests include education, journalism, and history. So thank you for being here, Juan. I'd now like to introduce to you our guest, Chris. Chris Land is the general counsel of the Wyoming Division of Banking, where he oversees the implementation of Wyoming's highly regarded blockchain and digital law asset laws, as well as supervision of Wyoming's growing financial services industry more broadly. Chris was the primary drafter of the 13 bills adopted by Wyoming in 2018 and 19, which set forth a detailed framework for the legal status of digital assets, digital asset custody, and the creation of Wyoming's new special purpose depository institution bank charter. In his career to this date, Chris has previously worked for the U.S. House Committee on Ways and Means, the British House of Commons, and the Florida Executive Office of the Governor. Chris was also recently a research fellow at the Northwestern University Pritzker School of Law. And additionally, this year, Chris was named as a distinguished young alumnus of Florida State University. Chris is a native of Panama City, Florida, and holds a Bachelor of Science from FSU, a Master of Laws in Legislation from the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, University of London, and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Minnesota Law School. He has accomplished a lot so far in a young career. So thank you for being here, Chris, and I will now hand it over to Juan.
Thank you, Amy, and welcome, Chris. Before we get started, participants, please feel free to ask any questions in our chat to our hosts, and we will do our best to get to them. I'd like to start by just asking you, Chris, could you briefly share a little bit about your journey through FSU and how you got into your current profession?
Yeah, thanks, Juan. This is one of those moments in your life where, you remember your time at Florida State doing things like this, and now you're on the other side of the table, and it's quite emotional for me and quite exciting because, I was in your shoes. It feels like a year or two ago, but turns out it's almost 9 years somehow. So it's kind of crazy. But my journey at FSU, I was super involved in the honors program and undergraduate research. Did a lot of internships at Florida State. I interned in the governor's office. I also did the gubernatorial fellows program, the governor's office, if any of you guys have thought about applying for that. Involved in student government at FSU and a lot of other, organizations. I was a history and political science major with a minor in philosophy, and honors in the major. Did research and all that. I tell a lot of my colleagues and friends around the world that, I got a world-class education at Florida State, and I really do stand by that. I'm really proud of the challenges and opportunities that FSU gave me, and I try to tout the value of a Florida State education every chance I get. But I guess I'll give you an overview of kind of my life to this moment. So yeah, I was at Florida State from 2007 to 2011, graduated 2011. Worked in Florida politics for a bit after that. Then I went to the UK and I got my master's degree over there, and then came back to the US for law school. Graduated from law school in 2016, and been working kind of in state politics since 2016. That's how I kind of got hooked up with Wyoming and their blockchain initiative. I'd initially planned to work in Washington, D.C. after law school, but kind of the political climate of the last few years, and the fact that most DC jobs don't pay a great deal of money and don't have any job security kind of led me to working in state politics instead of DC, and it's been incredibly rewarding. But now I'm here at kind of the intersection of finance and banking, the financial system, and tech and cryptocurrency, and it's really exciting.
Sounds really exciting. And it sounds like you were really a model student while you were here at FSU.
I don't know about that. I got into trouble a lot too, but yeah, we'll see.
Well, a lot of extracurriculars, a lot of great stuff.
Yeah,
I'm sure some fun as well.
yeah.
Actually that brings me to this other question. Your background is really extensive. What would you consider your most rewarding work to date?
To date, I do think what I'm doing now is really transformative because, for the first time in the history of the U.S. financial system, we're integrating cryptocurrency and digital assets into the banking system. I don't know if you guys are aware or not, but bankers are very averse to change, and very they like to take things slowly and very prudently, and they're focused on risks more than anything else. So it's been very hard but very rewarding. And what Wyoming has done, creating the new bank charter, setting out a legal framework for cryptocurrency for the first time in the U.S. has been it's made a big change, and it's promoted a lot of innovation in the U.S. financial system, something that I'm really proud of. And there's going to be more announcements to come in the coming weeks, and I look forward to continuing to move the ball, as it were.
Really exciting. On that note of big change, a student had asked a question that there was some talk that Bitcoin would replace the national currency in Venezuela in the past year. And
Yeah.
they've also heard that some countries in Africa plan to use Bitcoin as currency in some cities in the future. Do you think there's a real possibility that Bitcoin will replace a country's currency? And if so, how soon do you think it happen, and how would it happen, and how will Bitcoin's value change?
Yeah. Venezuela, great question. Venezuela's problem is, they're inflationary. They have a huge problem with inflation right now. So that's the reason a lot of Venezuelan citizens, not necessarily their government, are looking to Bitcoin as kind of a stable, store of value where they can park their money and not have it inflated away in a couple of days. The Venezuelan government also proposed that, the Petro, it was an oil-backed cryptocurrency a couple of years ago. I don't think that you'll see a sovereign country. By that I mean, I don't think you'll see a serious sovereign country adopt Bitcoin as their as legal tender or their national currency, mainly because controlling your own money and creating your own money is one of the most basic things the government does, right? And they don't want to cede that power away to a computer program that could do something they don't want to do, and they can't really control, right? So from a control perspective, I would expect national governments to want to hold on to creating their own currency. That being said, I could see like a microstate like the Marshall Islands or the Bahamas, or one of those tiny island countries. You might see one of them adopt Bitcoin as their official currency, but it wouldn't have a very large impact on the financial system.
On that note, would you think that a smaller nation might create their own cryptocurrency for in the banking system?
Yeah, that's a hugely important question. Last week, the Marshall Islands just announced they were issuing their own cryptocurrency. It's called the SOV, S-O-V, the sovereign or whatever. And there are also the Bank for International Settlements and the European Union and the IMF. They're all actively talking about their own sovereign national cryptocurrency. It would be called a central bank digital currency, CBDC. I do think in 10 years, the US will have its own cryptocurrency, and most of the large countries in the world will have their own cryptocurrency. And, China's piloting it right now too. They called it DCEP is what their acronym for China's digital currency is right now. But I do think in 10 years, it's kind of be the way everyone goes.
That's fascinating. On the topic of Bitcoin itself, do you have any tips on Bitcoin investing, and is there a specific strategy?
Yeah. I can't give investment advice out. You should hire an investment advisor or a commodities advisor for Bitcoin trading strategies. But I will tell you there are a lot of platforms out there like Coinbase and Kraken and Bitstamp, regulated entities where you can safely try out $100 or $200 on their platform and see if you can make money. They also have basic primers on how to trade Bitcoin and stuff. There are a lot of resources. I think CoinDesk, which is kind of like the periodical for all things blockchain and Bitcoin, It's a news outlet. I think they have some primers on how to invest in Bitcoin, and you can probably find some good videos. But as far as trading strategies, Bitcoin is an incredibly volatile asset. That makes it good for really sophisticated traders because they can arbitrage and do all that stuff and play around with the volume. But for the uninitiated investor, Bitcoin is volatile and you can lose a significant amount of money very fast. For example, Bitcoin has gone up from the $10,000 range to I think it's around 13,000 in the last week. And that's quite a significant increase. At the same time, it dropped down to I think there's a period in March where it went from $8,000 to 3,500 in a day. So it's a very volatile asset. Caveat emptor is the theme you need to remember.
Definitely don't want to put your 401k in there just yet.
Nope.
So on the topic of careers, what are some of the best careers in your opinion in finance? And do you consider, the second half of this is cryptocurrency a short-term or long-term investment?
Yeah. I'll take the second question first. I do think cryptocurrency is kind of a longer term play. I know a couple billionaires and they all made their money getting into Bitcoin in 2011 when it was like a penny per Bitcoin. And, now they made $1 billion overnight in 2017. So it is kind of a longer term play, but I would, as far as finance and tech careers, I do think the intersection of tech and finance is really, really interesting. You can make a lot of money and there's a lot of demand for people who know finance and tech right now. People who know that, are fluent in the language of finance, but also can, do some basic level of computer programming or have some, knowledge of how the law applies to tech, for example. So I do think the intersection of tech and finance is really critical. The financial, you might not know it now, but the financial system is undergoing a period of really, really transformational change behind the scenes. I like to liken it to, Amy and I are probably the only ones on this call that remember this, but, blockchain and financial technology right now is at about the same place that the internet was in 1996 or 1997. It's kind of out there and it's cool, but people don't really know what to make of it yet. And if you remember, you might not remember, but Google came on the scene in 2000 and 2001. And, they really took hold in the years after that. So we're kind of in that ramp up phase with fintech, and it's not too late to get aboard the train and get some of the first mover advantages is what I'm saying. Now's a good time to get into this space because, in the next 10 years, it's basically going to be how finance is run in the world.
Even though Bitcoin is the first mover right now, do you think that it's still in its infancy enough that, like the internet, I think in the late 90s, people would say that AOL and a few of these other groups were definitely the ones that would be running the show 10 years ago. Whereas then companies like Google or Facebook came in 10 years later. Do you think Bitcoin is that kind of has the staying power or the first mover power to remain? Or do you think that Wells Fargo is going to get in and then be the main one?
Yeah, I have no idea. That's just kind of, you'll talk to a lot of Bitcoin maximalists out there that think, why don't we need government? We can just let the Bitcoin blockchain run the world, and they obviously think Bitcoin's the be all and end all. But on the other hand, Bitcoin is, it has some characteristics like it's volatile, deflationary. It has an inherently deflationary bias, and there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin, right? So, I don't know, if I knew that, I would go put my 401k into Bitcoin and, walk away and not have to work again. But who knows? I don't know. But I do think the underlying technology, blockchain, distributed ledgers, and, financial technology more broadly, that's definitely a safe bet. I don't know about Bitcoin though.
Interesting. A more specific question, what are your thoughts on trading in the Forex market?
Yeah. I'm not a Forex trader. It's probably a better bet than Bitcoin, or at least it's more safe. I think there's a well-established, Forex Forex framework, and in some ways it's very comparable to Bitcoin because of the spot price and the need to potentially take out margin or do some arbitrage on down the line. But it's very similar to Bitcoin, but I don't deal with it a lot.
Great. And I think we have one more on the specifically the Bitcoin question. And this one was from the chat just now, and it is, a lot of people have talked about Bitcoin, saying that's like investing in digital gold. Do you think it'll hold its value well over the next decade? We've talked a lot about the volatility. How volatile do you think it will be?
So it's going to continue to be volatile for the foreseeable future. But if you look at the trend line and kind of the regression line, I do think there's some upside, some significant upside to. There's a really good guy in the Netherlands that has like a stock to flow model, and he like tries to map out where Bitcoin price projections and stuff. So I would follow him, but I do think there is some upside to it more generally, but not investment advice either. But there was some pushback a couple months ago on the whole store value digital gold narrative, but then JP Morgan actually released a note, an investment note a couple days ago that talked about how millennials kind of more see it as a store of value and digital gold. So I think it might be a generational thing. The older generation prefers gold. We prefer Bitcoin. But if you think about it, like, what's gold? It's just a shiny piece of metal, right? That's rare. But Bitcoin's kind of like that. It's just a rare element of code. In some ways, there are some theoretical similarities. Why is gold valuable? And it's just valuable because the consensus in society is valuable, right? So.
Interesting. Well, we have a lot of questions about career stuff. A lot of people are, I think you touched on a lot of different majors and a lot of different clubs and programs. So I think people are looking at their ways into fintech. And one question from the chat is, as a finance major, what can I do now to start aiming for a career in fintech?
Yeah, it's just first of all, you've got to. There's a steep learning curve. You got to do a lot of reading and familiarize yourself, and kind of become fluent in the language of fintech, and learning what the vocabulary is and what the current issues are. I would definitely consider taking an intro computer programming class, not like the basic, this is how you type stuff up class. I'm talking about like some basic like coding class, so you kind of become more fluent with the language. I would also, really internships and research are probably the two best ways in. There are a lot of companies right now that are, both in Silicon Valley and California and in New York and Washington, D.C., and even in Miami potentially, that are looking for interns with a focus on fintech. I'm definitely happy to be a resource to anyone on the call who needs to get plugged in. I'm fairly plugged in right now. And also, research is a big component. There are tons of unanswered questions in the fintech space, and it's a really, really fertile ground for someone who's looking to push themselves and kind of make a name for themselves by answering some difficult questions that are in the space. But excelling in kind of your core classes is always important, because some of the topics of fintech are really complicated, and you have to have that basic foundation and your core curriculum. But I think it's kind of a combination of all those factors.
Yeah. Someone asked, and I think this question really hits the mark, what type of tangible and intangible experiences and skill sets are required to be considered an entry-level intern in either the banking or the fintech industry? And what do you think that people have prized about you? Because I think that you've been moving through some pretty great places. Yeah.
Tangible skill set, I think, high achievement, and the core curriculum in finance classes and, all that stuff. Some internship, some previous internship and work experience, and maybe a little research experience. Intangibles, I think a commitment to work hard, kind of a commitment to, challenge assumptions and to ask, basic questions about when you look at something. You're not asking, you're always asking yourself, why are things the way they are? Because you always want to be challenging those core assumptions and asking why things are. That way you can make them better if you don't get a good enough answer from someone when you ask them why. A willingness to, be criticized and there's a term in the industry that, you have to be willing to fail, to be honest. You can't be averse to failure and, trying new things and continuing to try new things until you find something that works. I think it was what Thomas Edison said, when someone asked him, why he had failed so much, and he said he didn't fail. He just found 1,000 ways how not to make a light bulb, right? So it's stuff like that, and just a commitment to work hard too.
There's also that quote about perspiration versus inspiration.
I haven't heard that one. What's that?
I think it was either innovation is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think it might have also been Edison. I can't be sure. Someone asked, "How bad is law school really?" So it's very specific to your educational background.
Yeah. Well, I'll try not to scare too many people away from law school. Law school is tough. What I tell people when they tell me they want to go to law school is, do you know exactly what you want to do in the law? And are you absolutely committed to going to law school? And if you can't answer both of those questions, law school is probably not the best choice, because, even if you do go to law school, you're probably not going to do well. And you're not going to have the job you want after law school. Like, you might graduate and stuff, but it's not going to be as fulfilling as you want it to be. So the questions I would pose to the group about law school are, do you really, really want to go to law school? And if you do you know what kind of law you want to primarily practice in? And do you have a plan for after law school? Because if you just show up to law school with no plan and thinking, I want to be like that guy on TV or whatever, like, it's going to be challenging. And there are moments where, you question your own, capabilities and qualifications to be there and that kind of stuff. And it's that commitment that's going to get you through. Law school is a ton of reading. Like, it's more reading than you will ever imagine. I haven't read for fun since law school. I don't want to read anymore, because that's what I do all day is read. And in law school, you're reading, 3 or 4 more times than you do you do it while you're at work. So it's, I don't mean to say that it's not for everybody. It's tough. The bar is tough, but if you have a passion for the law and a commitment, then it's definitely something you should consider. Making the right decision about law school is really important too. You have to find a law school that, is a good fit for you, that, will offer you some scholarship money, hopefully, and has good professors that you connect with. It's just all about the right fit.
Sounds like you've already done enough reading for one lifetime.
Yeah, tell me about it. I have. Law school is, it's definitely something that you need to think long and hard about. And there are some definite advantages to maybe staying in state versus going out of state, because, Florida State's law school is pretty cheap compared to a lot of law schools, and it's still like a tier 1 law school. Whereas, my law school was, $55,000 a year, and, Harvard's like $65,000 a year. So, and they're asking you to take on a lot of debt that's going to take a lot of time to pay off, unless you go, you go off to New York City and do the corporate associate thing for a couple of years and pay your debt loans off.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was in a meeting in a Zoom seminar with John Thrasher, and he mentioned how when he went to Florida State Law School, basically just asking is enough to get in, and how much things have changed since then.
Yeah, it's like, it was funny. A couple of years ago, someone told one of my law school roommates that he used to work during the summer to pay his law school tuition, his summer job, and it was laughable. Like, you couldn't even come close to doing that now. It's so funny.
Working at the ice cream shop won't cut it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So now working as general counsel, what is a day in the life in that current position?
Yeah. I joke around sometimes. I don't get to do any real work anymore. It's just me. It just consists of me showing up to meetings and, talking to people on the phone or on Skype or Zoom or whatever. And I don't actually get to do anything fun, like, do real work and, do research and, type stuff up anymore. So it's just a lot of meetings. It's a lot of travel, or it was a lot of travel before this started. And it's a lot of responsibility. The buck stops with me for a lot of issues. And if I screw up, you get all the glory, but if you screw up, you also get all the backlash. So it's fun. So it's a fun job. But it's you have to, I was working last night at 10:30 at night. It's also that kind of thing too. So you have to be willing to make a really strong commitment to it.
Yeah. What someone asked, and I think this is especially interesting, with all your accomplishments and jobs and interests, what's your ultimate career goal? And they would love to know where you see yourself continuing to grow.
Yeah. Well, my ultimate career goal is to own a house in Key West and, go to the beach every day and, maybe work 2 or 3 hours a day. It's my ultimate goal. But I don't have the financial means to do that yet. So, no, maybe some of you guys may have caught on my opening monologue about how, like, I thought I was going to end up in DC after law school and kind of working on the Hill. But, there aren't any high paying jobs or no job security on the Hill or whatever. I've got that bug, that politics bug. Anyone on the call who knows what I'm talking about will probably instantly recognize what I'm saying. But, I've got the itch, the politics itch. So, I may find my way back to DC in the near future. We'll see, who knows. But my ultimate career goal, I don't really know what it is, to be honest. I know it'll probably be in politics or finance. I'm just going to go as far as I can go. I'm not going to be president or anything like that, but would I mind maybe running for Congress one day, or being in a senior staff role in Congress, or maybe the Federal Reserve or large bank or something like that? Yeah, I probably wouldn't mind that so much.
Secretary of the Treasury Chris Land does not have a bad ring to it.
Yeah, Leo Brainerd's gonna, she's on the Fed board. She's gonna be the next Treasury Secretary, I hear, in a couple of months. So she'll take that job before me. But she's very pro Fintech too, by the way. We're gonna get a lot of stuff done because Leo Brainerd's gonna be there, hopefully. But I don't. You guys all know about the Askew Student Life Center on campus. Governor Askew was one of my mentors at Florida State. That was towards his final years of, teaching at FSU. He taught the master's level program. And, he challenged me one day that, it's like, Chris, you're going to run for governor of Florida one day, and it's okay. Don't be too sad about it when it happens. So I don't know, I may end up doing that. I would love to come back to Florida at some point. But, that's another point I wanted to make to you guys while I'm talking to you. Probably a pearl of wisdom, as it were. But life is unpredictable when you leave undergrad and go to grad school, because you don't know what opportunities are going to present themselves, and you don't know where you're going to end up moving, or you don't know what you're going to end up doing. You just have to kind of go with the flow and take it one moment at a time. Because if you had told me, 5 years ago that I'd be living in, Wyoming doing blockchain and Fintech and Bitcoin, I would have, told you to go see a psychiatrist because you're probably having some issues. But, I've rationalized it to myself, okay, and done pretty well. But, I guess you never know the path that life is going to take you, and you have to be willing to go on the ride that life takes you and make the most of it. I don't regret anything I've done, certainly, but it's certainly been unconventional.
Great. This one, I think that this speaks to it, that only 5 years ago you wouldn't have ever expected to be where you are right now. But someone asked, is it common that your colleagues are your age, or are you really young for your career? I think you have to kind of manage your own career. It seems pretty novel. Pretty
I
interesting.
think I'm the second youngest person in my office, and I'm also like the second person in the hierarchy in the leadership in our office. So yeah, I'm super young, and yeah, yep, everyone in our office is much older than me.
Mhm.
Now, if I were to go to Washington and work in a Capitol Hill office, I'll probably be pretty old because most of the people in Capitol Hill are 20 somethings. So
Yeah, yeah. I saw an interesting interview of, I think it was Pete Buttigieg, talking about how they really want to imagine it's the West Wing, but it usually looks a lot more like Veep. Um,
yeah, yeah,
and the young staffers, I think, really speak to that.
yeah.
You mentioned pro fintech. Do you see DC going more pro fintech?
Yeah, they are. In the COVID relief bill that in one of the drafts, I think it was this summer, they actually proposed a central bank digital currency. The Democrats did, and now the Republicans are kind of seeing it's very bipartisan at the moment, fintech. So it's a good issue area. And China is starting to issue their own, Chinese cryptocurrency. So it's kind of a national security question at this point. If the U.S. wants to maintain its status as, kind of the world financial services hub, and the dollar is the reserve currency, we have to issue our own crypto in the next couple of years, or China's going to start taking all our business away, and we don't want to do that. So once you start talking about China and like national security and how they're going to, start threatening the U.S. dollar, like people in DC tend to get pretty interested at that point.
Mhm. We're starting to get this interesting collection of Bitcoin questions. I think
Okay.
you've inspired a lot of interest. Do you think that Bitcoin is traded by automated computer programs?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
What is, and so we can go through these. What's a way I can track my crypto portfolio?
There are all kinds of providers. Coinbase and Kraken both have like their own trading platform that you can use, and you can track how you're doing and stuff like that. If you were to ever, have a more serious, if you were to, have a really developed portfolio, like there are some institutional trading platforms like Talos and Securrency and Anchorage. They all have really built out platforms for like institutional traders. So, if you wanted to kind of dip your toes in the water, learn about how to trade crypto, I think, putting a couple $100 in a Coinbase or Kraken account and, just experimenting with their tools is probably a good way. And you won't lose a lot of money even if you screw up pretty badly.
Mhm. Yeah, I was I think earlier in the year when Robinhood added crypto, I think I got a fraction of a Bitcoin at that point.
Yeah.
Someone else asked, are there any recommended reading materials to help in those first steps dealing with investments? I obviously don't have the money right now, but I do plan on doing more with my money instead of just letting it sit in a savings account once I get out into my chosen majors field.
Yeah, I don't really have any recommendations, mainly because I wasn't a finance major at FSU. I kind of absorbed everything I know about the capital markets through osmosis, and people telling me about it and me faking it till you make it. You guys know how that is. When you're in an area that you're not that familiar with, you have to teach yourself and stuff. So I'm kind of self-taught. But probably the fastest way you can just get educated is just to read American Banker or the Wall Street Journal every morning, and the stuff you don't know, go look it up and read some about it when you have free time, and just kind of teach yourself.
Great. We've also got, if you invest in Bitcoin, can someone steal it?
Oh yeah, definitely. This is a good segue into why Wyoming's doing all this stuff, because I don't know if you guys are familiar with what Dutch bearer bonds are, but in a lot of like TV shows and like movies, there'll be this really bad dude who is like trying to pay somebody off, and he'll have a bag of these bearer bonds. I'm going to give you 10 million in untraceable Dutch bearer bonds. If anyone's seen Die Hard, that's what kind of comes out of the tower, Nakatomi Plaza, when at the end of the movie, there are all these bearer bonds. Bitcoin is a bearer bond, essentially. And that means that like this napkin, I can't prove that I own this napkin unless I'm holding it. That's what a bearer instrument is. It's the same way a dollar bill works. You either have it or you don't, or it's in your bank account and it's electronic or you don't. So Bitcoin is a bearer instrument in kind of the same way. You either have the private key or you don't. And that the fact of that is, because you either have the private key or don't, it's very important to safeguard it properly, because if your computer gets hacked or your exchange gets hacked, if you don't have that private key, you don't actually have the Bitcoin. It's just gone. What you can sue or whoever you want to, but it would be very difficult to get it back. So there's this concept called custody, and that's what Wyoming's kind of made its own. Custody in the financial markets today is kind of the bank or the trust company that's responsible for taking people's Bitcoin and safeguarding it, really, providing really high quality security and safekeeping services for financial assets. Two of the largest banks in the US today are State Street and BNY Mellon, and they literally had $30 trillion in assets under custody, trillion, but they're all like securities. And they literally, that's their only job, is to provide safekeeping services to, hedge funds and even individual investors just holding on to stock certificates that are immobilized. And we can get onto that later. But that is what Wyoming is doing. We've created a new bank charter to provide custody and safekeeping for people's Bitcoin and, other virtual currencies and digital assets, to provide people who don't necessarily want to print out, an alphanumeric string that has their private key on it and, put it in their safe or whatever. They can, put it into a bank, and, if something happens to the bank, they have some recourse and some legal options to get their money back. Otherwise, if you were just to hold on to your private key, you might lose it. You guys may have heard about some hacks that have happened in the last couple of years. Quadriga is the one I'm going to talk about now. That was last year. This Canadian dude was running an exchange, and he had he had hundreds of millions of dollars of Bitcoin on his exchange. But it was literally just him running the exchange, like nobody else. He didn't have any internal controls or procedures or anything that you would expect from a financial institution. Well, he died. And all the private keys to all his customers' Bitcoin were on his computer, and it was all encrypted. And all his investors, all the exchange customers, were just screwed because it was an untraceable encryption on his computer, and it was over. And so that's the potential danger of not using the right custodian or losing your money in the Bitcoin market.
Yeah. Regarding that issue, especially with these stories like that, with stories like, I think Fort Knox was one of the other, I'm not sure which one was another famous one from the past 5 years.
Mount Gox.
Yeah. And so these stories of stealing Bitcoin and this idea that's a digital currency as opposed to a physical one, I think most folks, especially now that we're going into this field where digital currency will most likely play a large part in people's future assets, I think there's a lot of concern of, well, they already know how current currency can be stolen. It can be stolen from your safe or from your bank, or, the stock market might crash. But I think there's going to be a lot of concerns going in the future. How will the future banks or the future issuers of cryptocurrency, whether that's a government or a bank, try and assuage those fears, and what are you doing in that field? Because I know with bank charters and stuff like that, you're certainly playing a role.
No, it's hugely important. There are a lot of different issues in there. One is having the right legal framework, apportioning the liability between the bank and the customer, in the right way, and making sure those duties are clear. Another issue is, making sure that the bank isn't, using your money to bet in the digital asset casino, or, to bet on the markets inappropriately. It's called credit risk. Another thing is, they better have the top IT team in the world, or one of the best IT teams in the world, to, prevent hacks, and to put all the safeguards and controls in place to make sure that, some, 12-year-old hacker in Ukraine can't, hack into the bank and take everyone's Bitcoin and buy a Lamborghini for himself. So IT is a really huge issue too. And then, just making sure that the model of the bank's profitable and they can make money to continue reinvesting all that into a more secure platform. But, it's, there are a lot of legal requirements too, but those from a high level, that's kind of what you need to look for. The more established exchanges like Coinbase and Kraken and Bitstamp, and they're all regulated. So that's something else you want to look for. You want to make sure that there's a regulator who knows what they're doing, that's kind of overseeing them on a regular basis and that kind of thing, like the SEC, us, the CFTC, New York, something like that, or even Florida. Florida's starting to get into the fintech space, and look forward to seeing what they're up to.
Yeah, I think right now we're hearing a lot more. There's a lot more stories about hacks, whether they're on a national level like power grids, or on something more specific like cryptocurrency. I think we're hearing a lot more about hacking than we're hearing about bank robberies. And once they become one and the same, it's gonna be pretty interesting.
That's like my worst fear is, I get a call at 2 a.m. saying, Kraken's bank just got cleaned out, they're insolvent, come help us close them down. That's the reason IT has to be, the IT infrastructure of these banks has to be just like world class, or else you're gonna get hacked.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of black hat and white hat hackers, I think is part of that role.
Exactly. Red team and blue team. Yep, that's what they call them.
Yep. Someone asked, what do you think of mining your own Bitcoin?
It just got, with the halvening, the halvening happened last year, right? Where, it got a lot harder to mine Bitcoin. And it's the block reward got cut in half, right? So I don't know that mining Bitcoin is commercially viable now, unless you own like a coal plant, or you have a dam or something like that, or a nuclear reactor in your basement. You can always mine Bitcoin, but I don't know if it makes economic sense. You'll have to do your own kind of calculation. But yeah, you can certainly mine Bitcoin yourself. You can get a GPU and just let it run all day. But it's gotten tougher to mine Bitcoin recently. But yeah, there are literally people. Wyoming's trying to get off coal right now. And kind of diversify its economy. We've literally talked to people that want to buy an old coal power plant in Wyoming just to mine Bitcoin, because the power's cheap, and they have this big power plant that they can make their own power just to mine Bitcoin. So it's kind of weird. But
that's fascinating. I feel like some supercomputer groups like NASA or someone like that, it's like, well, we could go for the government funding, or we could try and fund ourselves by mining Bitcoin all day.
Or maybe create a quantum computer and mine Bitcoin. That would make things quite a bit easier. You could probably mine a lot of Bitcoin in fairly short order with a quantum computer.
That's exciting. I think a lot of groups are working on that. One other question. I think we're mostly through the questions from the chat, but there's a lot of these interesting questions about blockchain that aren't really specific to crypto. And while I'm not sure how much that's your field, I think you probably know a lot more about it than we do. So I guess I'd like to ask, what do you think the applications for, I know it's a loaded question, but I think it's so confusing for so many people. What do you think the applications of blockchain outside of crypto are going to be that we're going to see in the next few years?
There are tons. Let me tell you, and this is actually the more sustainable option. Like I said, crypto is a thing, but blockchain is many more wider applications than just crypto. Stock certificates is probably the closest relation. Right now, I don't know if you guys know it or not, but whatever you have in your Robinhood or Fidelity account, you don't actually own, you just have a claim on it. And there's some legal eccentricities around that. But the actual stock certificate that you have a claim to is in the basement of a place called the Depository Trust Company in New York City. And it's legally owned by someone else, and blah, blah, blah. Blockchain has the potential to take every stock certificate in America and put it on a blockchain, and you could just trade the tokens back and forth, and that would increase trade volume. It would increase liquidity in the markets, and you would directly own it. So you would have a stronger legal claim on it. So stock certificates and securities are probably that's the safest application for blockchain that exists in the US today. Something else that's really important is digital identity. there are a lot of privacy issues around this, but when you go to a bar, like when you go to a bar on Tennessee Street, the bouncer doesn't need to know what your address is or, you know, what your height is or what your hair color is, right? The only thing they actually need to know is that you're of legal age to enter the bar, right? So there is a potential for you to have a digitally issued identity that's on a blockchain, and that you would literally like scan a QR code on your phone when you're going to the bar, and it would just know you're of legal age, and you don't need to give someone else all your personal information. There's a lot of oversharing of personal information. Like, you don't have a choice to share, you know, personal information with like Amazon and Google and all those folks today because they just need it. But there's the potential to use a digital identity that's offered on a blockchain, and you could share your identity in such a way that you wouldn't have to reveal too much data or more than they need to know for the purposes of that one transaction. And it's that blockchain has the potential, even though it's public and very you know, distributed, is the potential to actually increase privacy in that way. There's some other things are like healthcare records and energy. But those are kind of the coolest things that I've worked on to some extent to this point.
Yeah, it sounds like blockchain, I think, sounds like it has the potential to be the next big thing. If, you know, the internet was the 90s and mid 2000s and all that, I think blockchain has a lot of potential along with AI, probably.
Yeah, definitely.
How has AI helped your work, if at all?
Yeah, I haven't really done a lot with AI, to be honest. It's been mostly working on finance, but I do know there are some traders. There's some traders in New York that are exploring AI to, you know, increase their trade volume and decision making and high frequency trading and stuff. But I think we have a lot of questions that have to be answered about AI. You know, making sure it doesn't turn into a forced, you know, an evil force in the world, and, you know, keeping it within certain bounds. But yeah, I just haven't had a lot of interaction with it.
Great. And I think we're almost just wrapped up, but have you ever watched the show Silicon Valley?
No, nope.
There's one season that kind of explores Bitcoin and blockchain in a very funny way, but the concept of 50%, like not a direct attack of service, but the 50% attack, where so if you could touch on that and how that works and whether we should fear it, I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah. So this is the only real way to take down a blockchain, because if you think about what a blockchain is, it's essentially like, it's like a million computers that each have a copy of the database. And the way the program works is, you know, if 50.1% of the computers agree that one version of that network or one version of that database is correct, then that's the truth that everyone has to accept. So you could hack the Bitcoin blockchain today if you had enough computing power to take over 50.1% of the nodes in the Bitcoin network. Problem is, that's a lot more than a million computers or whatever, and it would take even a quantum computer a long time to break the Bitcoin blockchain. It's never been hacked. The custodians and individual exchanges have been hacked, but the Bitcoin blockchain itself hasn't been hacked. So the concept of a 50.1% attack is just gaining 50.1% of the computing power relating to a particular blockchain and using that voting power to overrule the rest of the network, and to, you know, say that you could do a lot of mischief if you had that percentage of the computing power. That's the only real way to hack a blockchain.
Awesome.
Great.
Oh, sorry, Juan. I was cutting in because I think that was the last question. And I've got to be honest, I was taking notes because this is something I know nothing about, and it's very interesting, and you know so much. So thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise with us. Was there anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No, I mean, you know, just a couple other pearls of wisdom, I guess. You know, life is going to be uncertain for the next couple of years, but that's cool. You know, you just have to roll with the flow. You know, my time at FSU was, you know, some of the happiest moments of my life. And, you know, it's not saying that was the happiest moment of my life. It's just more of, you know, it was different. It was a lot more carefree, and, you know, you could go out on the weekends and do all this, you know, non-adult stuff that you don't have to do now and all that jazz. But another thing is, the decisions you make and, the next couple of years are going to be very formative, and you need to make sure you, think hard about the choices you're making and work really hard, because, the opportunities you have won't be put on a silver platter like they are now in such a way. And I guess the thing I'll leave you with is, if anyone wants to talk more about any of this stuff, happy to connect you guys with anyone in the industry you want to talk to, or internship opportunities or research, or happy to be a resource to anybody, because I remember how hard it was for me at Florida State, and hard it is for everybody. I know how hard it is to get opportunities and to make the most of your time. So definitely want to be a resource to anyone. That's all I got.
Thank you, Chris. I'm putting in some information into the chat right now, but tomorrow I will be sending out a follow-up email, and with Chris's permission, I will include his email address in that for anybody that wants to reach out to him personally. As you all know, today was recorded as well, so I'm going to put that recording in the follow-up email too. So if there was something you wanted to go back and catch and get that tidbit, you'll be able to do so starting tomorrow. So again, I just want to thank Chris. I want to thank Juan, and stay tuned. We have one more speaker series left for the semester on November 12th. So make sure you check out our social media so that you can join us. And thank you all for being here today. Hope everyone.
See you guys. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, Chris.
See ya.